will go on and get started now, kind of 1 minute ahead of time. And as people come on in, hopefully they will see the chat session. Once again, we have got a chat session where it has been loaded up with the link to the discount codes for the various vendors for the virtual Christmas summit. Do encourage everybody to go on out and have a look at them and support our vendors. They do a lot for us, and this is kind of a fun, exciting time. We're beginning to see some really good innovation, both from the vendors as well as from those in the field. So these are truly exciting times. Today, I'm going to talk about building and configuring firework stars. I am Charlie Comiskey. I am the face behind Lights on Waverly. I've got a Facebook and a YouTube presence. And if my screen will go down, let's see here. Here we go. What we will cover today is what is a firework star. We're going to talk a little bit about planning for one. We'll cover some of the build it, and then we'll talk about the configure, how to configure it. Some of the exciting things that will be covered today is I want to talk a little bit about some of the updates in the 3D printed realm, as well as I spend a lot of time doing some of the off the shelf. I'll admit I'm a little bit biased towards the 3D printed one, but there's a lot of community interest in off the shelf. I've been watching, observing. There are some design and engineering points that I've learned as part of the 3D printed that I thought would be good to try to reflect within do-it-yourself type of options. And so I'm presenting a flavor of how do you do it from off-the-shelf parts. So if you don't have a 3D printer or you just don't want to mess with it, there are certainly options to be able to go on and do it. There's support for less expensive rods. I mean, I heard from folks the grumble of dimensionally accurate fiberglass rods. We support the Harbor Freight, and I'm pretty sure, I haven't tried personally, if somebody were to go and get the Amazon equivalent, which is green versus bright orange, I bet they would work just as well. And then I did a couple of comparison analyses as people make some considerations, because planning is a really important thing. I've been flashing lights for about 7 years. I spend an awful lot of time on the firework star and the computer lighting hobby, as well as 3D printing. When I'm not doing that stuff and spending time with my family, and my son is in Scouts and doing a really grand job on all that stuff, I do like barbecuing a whole bunch. And you probably can't see it, but I'm wearing a t-shirt from an electronic controlled a temperature probe that is really awesome to be able to do things. And ultimately, I've got this driving need to solve puzzles. And that is kind of where the Firework Star project has come into play, because it has been one puzzle after another. I realized when they said something unique that nobody knows about you, I had to search back, way back. And sometime in the very late 70s, it might have been even 1980, literally itself, I realized I had built my first firework. The one day of summer break that I would be up before daylight, because I like to sleep in a lot, was always the day after the 4th of July fireworks event. And I realized if you get out there very early, you can go around, you find the little bits of the gunpowder and stuff like that, and then you light it up and it flares up. It's really kind of cool. And it's truly the case of the early bird gets the worm. And apparently I beat the event planners, because the night before, they had a rocket that was not successfully launched. And the early bird got the worm. I recovered it. The picture is a modern day representation. I recollected it was a little less colorful versus TNT Boom 76. But, it was maybe not as visually obvious, but it said, "Shoot me." And so I found it. I used some of my scouting skills and lashed it together versus the square knots that you see here. I found a really big bottle rocket stick. I lashed it to it. I was in my friend's backyard. We lit it off. It went across the block, across my parents, who were entertaining family. And next thing I knew, "Charlie, come home right now." I got into a heap of trouble. But it was a whole bunch of fun. I still find them rather mesmerizing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about really two elements of firework stars. There is a 3D print project of various STL files that people can download and print to be able to help them build various firework star creations. And then secondly, this runs in X-Lights, and I have overcome some of the unique challenges to be able to create an X model that can be used to be able to do sequencing and other cool things. So it's really two pieces to the project. And so with that, we're going to start our journey on an awesome firework. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges, help determine what do I need, and then how will I go about doing this. So, we're kind of here at the planning phase, and hopefully, before that's the twitchy mouse. Hopefully before we end of time, we will be up to the sequencing part, the summit of our peak. Before I go too much further, there is a growing community of firework stars that are out there. Whether it be Vito Pace or Jimmy here, our host room moderator, we've got a growing number of firework star examples, and this mouse is going to drive me nuts. But if we go back, this one here is really kind of awesome, and hopefully this will go on and play. This one is a short video example from the Wolf's Family Lights on top of a mega tree. It is really nice and impressive. And I also wanted to go on and highlight this because very soon here we are going to see an example of some of the challenges that folks have had to overcome. And I appreciate everybody, including me, in their journey. If anything, to be able to help curate some of the best practices and what all we need to do. So we got things kind of broken out into three areas for planning. We've got a set of challenges that we'll talk about. We'll do a little bit about what do I need to do it. And then there's a bunch of how do I do it. As you can see, it's a rather comprehensive map here. But it's good to kind of learn up a little bit on what a firework star is and what you want to do, because there's a number of different choices. That's what makes this such a really neat and then potentially challenging project. But allow you to create something that is cool and unique and authentic to each and every one of us. Challenges. So one of the key things here is the weight and the size. Unlike our normal tendency to build stuff as strong and heavy and thick as we can, we do have to be careful. For these stars, while they aren't as big and heavy as a megatree, they do have some challenges. As you can see here, weather compounds it, as we can see in the little video example to the left. This was before the mount to the star was reinforced with kind of a double insulated type of setup to be able to make it good. Something else that I notice I don't see enough of within the Facebook posts is safety. These things have many pointy spokes, and I have personally, and fortunately I wear glasses, I have personally run into one and it ricocheted off of my glasses. I try not to be too overbearing in the community, but whether you do it yourself or whether you do 3D printed, there's this concept of a spoke end cap. Do go on and do it. So at least then you'll have a blunt force trauma as opposed to a sharp object that is poking your eye. There are certainly some risks with this. The other challenge here is just the overall the size and the shape. It's three-dimensional in size and in depth. And little things that you wouldn't necessarily think of kind of crop up. In this case, this is like a 4-foot one. I imagine when we start getting to the lighter weight seeds, 6 and 8 foot stars may begin to emerge. They're like really big, supersized spores. And so what do I need? One of the first things that you'll have to think about is what kind of hub you want. There are kind of three types there are the 3D printed types. There's something called the spiky sphere, and then the Polaris, also known as the segmented center. In this case, you can do fully 3D print of just about everything, with exception of the fiberglass rods, and be able to put them together. There's the off-the-shelf, or kind of the do-it-yourself kind of hybrid. You don't need any 3D parts, and you can just use a porcupine fish attractor. It's a common hub that a lot of people use. There's also an option that allows you to do kind of a hybrid, where you can have both 3D printed parts on the porcupine fish attractor type of hub. There's also a growing number of commercial examples. Miner from your Pixel store has an example of one that's out there. 42 spokes, up to 640 addressable lights. When it comes to the actual LEDs, it's even more than that. It's approaching 2,000. And then James at Biscoyo, he's got his Stellar Star, 25 spokes, at 12 lights going up and 12 lights going down. A number of kind of big light options. So whether you want to build it yourself or go the full gamut of purchasing commercial, there are a number of options here. From a spoke perspective, you're going to have to consider what you do for spokes. The ones that I'll talk about the most are pixels on round stock, or seat lights, kind of the bookending at the beginning and the end of this list. But I've seen examples of strip lights, putting pixels on PVC pipe. I think that was kind of the original approach from several years ago. In some cases, both do-it-yourself or off-the-shelf, as well as from the Your Pixel store, some of them go on and use meteor tubes. One of the key things is 3D printed or off the shelf. And what I tried to do here was as non-biased as possible, a kind of an assessment on a number of important elements to consider. If you look at the left-hand most side, the off-the-shelf PVC pipe, that's kind of the classic way that everything kind of got started with. The parts are pretty inexpensive, but the weight begins to really add up. And one of the things that really hit me, and the reason why I bought my Porcupine Star hub and then it sat in the garage for 2 years, was I watched a video of somebody taking like 30 to 45 minutes having to meticulously put everything in. I was also a little bit concerned about the visibility. If you have a set of lights on it, are you really going to be able to see it from most viewing angles within a display? Since then, a number of options. There's the off-the-shelf plug. There's the off-the-shelf cap. They're really pretty similar in capabilities. The plugs at about $1.60, $1.70 a piece that I've noticed at Home Depot or Lowe's is a little more pricey than some of the off-the-shelf PVC caps. But both work really well. They are lighter than the traditional PVC type of pipe. And then there's the 3D printed variety. If you've got a printer, then it's the 3D printed do-it-yourself. The parts actually, after you assume you've already covered the cost of your printer and your filament, are really pretty inexpensive. It's a good, cheap way of doing it. It is a super light way of putting together a star, and you get a fair amount of variety. I personally started posting stuff out on Colts versus Thingiverse because it's easier as a user to go in and download the files that you would like. And if you so like, you can actually go on and from within the Colts interface, you can go on and contract out to a number of print services. If you do so, don't pay attention to the initial quotes that'll pop up within 30 or 60 seconds from when you do it. Give it about 5 to 7 minutes. It continues to look and learn, and you start receiving some quotes that are actually not too bad. It's still a little more expensive than trying to do it yourself or an off-the-shelf cap type of solution, but comparatively, it isn't a whole bunch more expensive. The neat thing about the 3D printed flavors is it gives you potentially more varieties in the different hubs that you would go on and use. The next big thing, which I think everybody will unanimously agree, you want to spend less for fiberglass rods. The two big front runners out there is the Harbor Freight, which claims to be 3/16 of an inch. It's not quite, which was a challenge early on with the project. And then the other side is the dimensionally accurate, the quote unquote pultruded fiberglass rods. We've got vendor examples. I've personally done business with Goodwins and Tap Plastics. Both of them are good to use. The cost of the rods is a little more expensive. The killer tends to be the shipping. If you can, after you've done something, you know this is what you want to replicate. If you buy enough material for 2, 3, or 4 of the stars at once, it brings the price down some. But it is admittedly more expensive than the Harbor Freight variety. It looks like Amazon has got pretty much the same thing. I put a maybe because I haven't tried, but if there's somebody in the community that tries the Amazon and finds that it works well, please go on and let me know, and I'll be happy to upgrade Amazon from a maybe to a full-blown yes, you can go on and do it. A couple of things to consider. I mean, I think price is probably going to be the overriding factor for everybody here, because it is just less expensive to use the electrical wire fishing rods. There is a difference in firmness and potentially a difference in the practical length that you can make your stars. The electrical wire rods are bouncy. They're more bouncy than you get with the dimensionally accurate fiberglass rods, which at short lengths is not much of an issue. You can go on and start it because these are wire fishing rods. You can attach one to the next. They get really bouncy quick. So you can go beyond 3 feet, but expect it's going to sway all over the place. It might get a little too messy depending upon your needs or tastes. If you go to Tap Plastics, for example, you can order 6-foot length dimensional fiberglass rods, and they are not nearly as bouncy as what you get with the Harbor Freight type of variety. But this is just a quick comparison of it. Take a look at it and select the material that best fits your needs and as well as your budget. The next thing is, am I going to do bullet pixels or seed lights? Originally, it was bullet pixels because I wasn't even aware of the seed lights. They really just kind of stormed on the scene here the last year. My very first Firework star, I did it with a lot of soldering, and I still have the video, and it's an option if somebody wants to just get the straight strings, but it's a lot of soldering and it's very tedious. If you want to go with the bullets, nowadays I recommend going with icicle strings. I have done business with 1 or 2 of the vendors. The key specs that you want to share with them is you want 4 inches node to node. So let's say you 10 lights per drop. 4 inches between each light, and then between each one of the drops you want 5 inches. I've experimented with different distances below the 5 inches, and 5 inches tends to be the best. It's a little extra in some cases, but there's some areas, as we'll see in another picture, where your clusters of lights are going to have to span a little bit of a way, and it's welcome to have just a little bit of extra wire up there to be able to go on and do it. You're going to want to consider how many spokes per, I'm calling it a cluster of lights that you want to do. The very first one I did with 2 sets of 13 spokes. It went together okay. It was a little tough. When I tried to take it apart, it was a disaster. I had a rat's nest of wires, so bad so that even after I had them all off, I almost had to cut the wires to be able to get things kind of resorted. Further, if you've got an issue during your season and a light goes out, it's a lot easier to take off a cluster of fewer spokes. You can take that into the warmth of the house and go on and fix it. You just swap it out with another one. At the same time, you don't want to have too many of them because it introduces a lot of connection points, and a connection point is an opportunity for water ingress. So I have a little table here of suggested things. For bullets, I personally use clusters of 6 spokes, and then I've got a couple of single spokes. When I do it like this, I've got probably around 25 to 30 clusters of uh, of lights. And depending upon my mood, whether it be the 26, the 32, or the 52-point star, I I just go on and use whatever sparks spokes against whichever particular one. So if you're looking at like a multi star type of setup later on, having these things in reasonable size clusters that you can assemble from one to the next is a good thing. Or you can pick seed lights, and I think this is where everybody's going to more or less be looking to go. The spokes can either have 1 or 2 seeds up at the very tip of it. My experience is the 5 centimeter spacing looks good. It doesn't overextend the various spoke lengths. You could probably do even smaller, but for the size of this, probably the distance that the audience is at, you may not want to have to mess with some of the challenges of attaching things with like a 2 or 2.5 inch spacing between the various lights. In this case, though, I find that 4 spokes per cluster works really well. And so the very first X model that I'm going to put out is it's actually 2 rows of 11 lights plus a 12th row, which is a single light. What's nice about this is when you have this, plus you have 1 light leading into the spoke and 1 light leading out, it gives you a nice solid 100 seeds per string. And I noticed at least one vendor recently here posting a sale, I think it was like $550, probably before shipping, of seed lights with connectors attached to it. So, it's a good standard amount. So you don't even have to do any soldering with that. You just go on and order up a bunch of those and, take 4 of your spokes and put them together and make it even more simple. 5 volt versus 12 volt. I had to put this in. You could do either. These are high density props. So if you really want to do 5 volt, you can. As we go to higher density stars in the future, amps are going to play a bigger role. I realize they're pretty small, and somebody in the community talked about 24 volts, and I'm not kidding. I'm going to start looking at the 24 volts. But at some point, you're going to have to pay more attention to the amps. And so 12 volts is a little more amp friendly than 5 when you assume you probably got a controller and a power supply that's on the ground, and you're having to now push all that all the electricity up the star to where it actually is. As I'm doing my designs, I'm also looking at multiples of 6 lights because it looks as though the 24 volt flavor is really aligned towards an architecture that you do things in series of 6 lights. So if you decide to go really creative and do things, keep that in mind. If you can keep your multiple in 6s, I think it'll probably be good for porting over to 24 volts, perhaps in the future. There's mounting options. So probably the best, albeit it can be more expensive, is a commercial megatree. You can see here an example. I've got a Matos Designs megatree. I put one of my stars up there. I had to do a little bit of work for a custom mount to be able to make that work, but it is industrial strength. And while these stars are not super heavy, they are heavy enough. And the point of them is you're going to put them pretty high up into your display. So it just means they're going to be that much more at risk to the weather and to stresses down on the ground. So going something industrial strength is probably the best option if it meets your budget and it's something you can go on and do. I also do stuff though myself with heavy duty tripods. I don't push these nearly up to the same heights as you see with the industrial strength. What I like about these is they're telescoping, but it does require active management. I set up several of these in my display this past Christmas, but every evening I went outside, I raised them. Every night I went outside, I lowered them, except for the one night that things were so cold that it froze in place. You do have to pay more attention to weather, and I had a couple of higher wind evenings that were projected, and my stars just stayed down. But it is an option that works. You want to get something that's probably a tripod. You can't see it too well, but I've got it reasonably well sandbagged. I probably need to do something more for next year. But heavy duty tripods or, like commercial speaker stands. There's a DJ one I might go on and get that allows you to do a level of crank up. Is a really good option. There are a number of folks that are doing straight poles. It does require some bespoke engineering. The thing that is good here that you can see is in this particular case, this emitter has braced it to their house, but it does require some specialized engineering that you're going to have to assess your environment and your scenario, and probably plan on doing something more. But straight poles can be done. And then there's the option of roof mount, and I'm aware of at least one person that's planning to do that here for this season. I personally haven't. I'm eager to see what some of the community innovation is, and whether they share or they can share with me that I can go on and aggregate and share back out around. I don't see a reason why you can't do it, but you're gonna have to be careful. There's also the hanging mount, and if you all watched my video early about a year ago, I talked about this one. I still hang one, but in general, I don't do this quite as much. It's definitely an option, but it does carry some unique risks. And I think we're going to hit that here in one of the follow-on slides really soon. And this is it. So this is location. You need to think about where you're going to put it. Kind of a humorous note here. You see the picture of the tree with the big yellow circle. Early on when I was testing it, I put one up into the tree and it wasn't too hard. I had to kind of push it out of the way to get it below, some of these lower branches. And it looked great for the 2 weeks. Bringing it down was a tangled experience. No matter what I wanted to do, it did not want to come down because it's a 4-foot spore. It kept getting caught up on the branches. I mean, I was eventually successful because this picture was taken afterwards, but it's a challenge with hanging. While it seems obvious, I want to stick it into a tree. Remember, you've got long spokes. There's all sorts of branches within the tree. You might be tangling with more than you expect. And you can see here too. I mean, I haven't quite figured out how far back. I'd like to push my industrial strength tree as far back as I can, but I've got this big tree that's kind of overlooming it. So we'll see how that goes, but location is an important thing to consider, ideally before you get started, so you can figure out if you want a 4-foot diameter or a bigger type of star. One of the things I like, to a degree with the do-it-yourself, and certainly with the off-the-shelf, and certainly with the 3D printed, is these things collapse down. I've got a reasonable size house, but I don't have a whole bunch of room to be able to store all the stuff. I don't have a shed outside like some do. Think about how you're going to collapse it, and then also how easy is it to assemble and disassemble, because I don't know if people appreciate just how much time it takes, and the value of your time, especially during setup. You've got the pressure of I got to get this up and running, and the concept of having to spend hours upon hours setting up a prop doesn't sit very well with me. So I like having something that's small and collapsible, whether it be off season or simple to install afterwards. And so with that, we will go on to build it, and we'll see how we're doing. Okay, I'm running a little over, but not super bad. We're going to talk a little bit about the 3D printed, and then we're going to talk about the off-the-shelf type of options. So tools and supplies, this is something that I'll do a screenshot and probably share it out into one of the Facebook forums early on here for everybody to be able to go on and look, and then you'll be able to refer to the video once it gets posted. There's a number of common parts regardless of which direction you go, and then you will either go the 3D printed unique route. There are some pieces that you will want to get, or there is the off-the-shelf unique way of doing it that you'll want to be able to source your supplies as part of doing this. If you go the 3D printed hub route, you have got two choices. So early on, I started working with another person in the 3D print community. UK Dell is his handle, and together this is how we kind of really got started. And fortunately, he provided a lot of help and guidance. It it is his sphere designs that that the Firework Star runs on for whether it's the spiky sphere or the Polaris. It's each one is cool in its own way. I have got links. If you go to the T is Thingiverse, if you go there and search on the individual thing number, you'll be able to go directly to his particular designs. Additionally, he has also followed suit and started posting his stuff out onto the Colts website. And what I've included here is the appropriate keywords to be able to go on and get them. And then you got the Porcupine. I mean, you don't print the hub itself. You purchase it perhaps from Amazon. But there are a number of different connectors that you print. You need these connectors with both the spiky sphere and the Polaris as well. But you can do that. The first version of the connectors of the Firework Star project are out on Thingiverse. I will probably just keep them out there. Increasingly, I'm making sure that there's links from there to the Colts website. The version 1 is a bayonet style. It includes some pen springs. Early on, it was really easy to be able to assemble and disassemble, but as I was trying to tighten up the tolerances to make the plugs it hardened them to make them even more robust, it became more and more difficult to be able to stick them in and pull them out. And I realized, the combination of this and over time, pen springs might begin to rust. A different approach was needed. And so I recently came out with the version 2 of the various connectors, and I make these available on Colts. It is a barrel style connector. It reduces the number of parts. It hardens the part pieces. Kind of going forward, I recommend everybody go to the version 2 of the 3D printed parts. The good thing is if you started with the version 1 and you want to upgrade to version 2, you can continue to use the spokes that you have. It's basically a swap out of some of the printed parts. And so the only piece that you'll have as waste is retiring your old V1 printed parts. You just put in the V2 stuff and you should be good to go. And this here is a picture of all the different parts that go along with it. There's a lot of them. In some cases, it's because I've got parts both for 3/8 inch mounts or for an M10. I really try to do things kind of from a global perspective. And for those that are not in the US, you get the benefits of having a truly metric system. So we've got those. I've also got 2 items up here, which I have to add to the project over the next day or two. And these are I call them seed to spoke clips. They are items that are relevant if you're going to go down the journey with applying seeds to the various lights. But this is the overall set of the items. The big highlights here for the version 2 is it uses barrel connectors, which I think ultimately make it a lot simpler to be able to install and remove the spokes. It has the support for the seed lights, and to reduce the crazy number of parts that I was beginning to build up, I built a 1/2 inch slip adapter to be able to go into the porcupine ball. This way, the same spoke plugs and spoke pins that are being offered can simply be screwed into the porcupine star as opposed to having a whole bunch of additional parts. Overall, it's going to be stronger and it's going to be more secure in the overall mounting. If you don't have a 3D printer, what I would ask is go out and register for an account, download the files yourself, and then whether you use a 3D print service available off of Colts, or there are some 3D print vendors that are on some of the forums. If you want to reach out to them and have them print the files that you downloaded for yourself, go for it. I kind of look at it as the old kind of Kinko's model. You take it to the printer and they can go on and print it for them. That is kind of the model that I'm looking to go here as part of making these files available to the community. The 3D print hub assembly. So perhaps the biggest of the two, the most challenging, is the 52 point. And what I would say with this is all 10 parts look very similar. So as you print them out, be meticulous about taking a little piece of tape and label them 1 to 10. You'll also see I've got these little underlines behind the numbers. In some cases, they're below the number. In other cases, they're above. The top and bottom, the portion of thread that gets divided across 10 different sections. In some cases, one side to the other begins to count. And so the underline just helps me make sure that I've got these in the correct direction. And actually, I see here number 3, I probably should have flipped around such that the underlines were all in the same right. Actually, I kind of failed the test of keeping all the underlines in the right direction with this picture. But you want to go on and do that such that as you begin to glue these pieces together, the top and the bottom thread will more or less be exactly what you're looking to do. Another item is there's pins. One way is you can design and print your own M4 size pins. I did that. The printer I was originally using wasn't such a great printer, and it did not do a good job. The pins really kind of felt flimsy. I tried 2 other ways. You can get some really heavy duty solid wire. I believe mine was 9 gauge. I get it from Lowe's. I cut them in little pieces. I kind of filed them down because they had some really sharp edges, and I used those to glue in. They worked well, but it was a little tedious doing that stuff. What I found works best is get a bunch of M4 8mm screws. On one side, it will screw in. It might actually very closely just kind of slide in. On the other side, if you need to, you can take a drill bit and you just kind of pilot it out just a little bit. It's a simple way of being able to get your pins and be able to make it work. Final item is you're going to have to glue this thing. I've tried several different glues. I think the clear winner here is the Gorilla Glue. Get the clear stuff. It has a slow set time, so you'll have to have a little patience assembling your ball, especially if it's the Polaris 52 point. But you want a little bit of that slow set time to be able to make sure that as you're putting the pieces together, that you get them working exactly the way you want. I did one ball with Loctite or just standard crazy glue, and the set time was too fast. I got it to work, but I don't use that ball anymore because the assembly just ended up looking a little too sloppy. The very first ones I was doing, I did polyurethane glue. They work well, but it leaves a messy residue, and you can even see with the picture on the side. I mean, it doesn't look that pretty. Now at night, people aren't going to go on and see it anyways, but that was after a lot of cutting things away with an X-Acto knife, doing some sanding. Again, I think the clear glue, Gorilla Glue works best. Here's a couple of pictures. When you print your pieces, you'll note that one side will probably have been printed against the build plate, and the diameter of the hole will be a little bit less than what it would be with the other. The left side holes in the picture are slightly smaller than the ones on the right. You can take a 5/32 bit, and I'm rather specific on that one, and you can go on and tap out at whatever size you need to, and it works out really well. You're going to want to do this over glue sessions. So hopefully the picture and the order here makes sense. My first glue session, I'll put together sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then for session 2, I will add section 5 to 3, 4, and I'll add 10 to 8, 9, and on until you get everything glued together. So, and when I do it, I tend to wait roughly 24 hours. I'll do it across 4 days and be able to put it together. It takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth the time and effort to be able to get a good quality assembly. Mounting these things. So this is where I've gone through a couple of designs and details as to how I would go about doing this. You're going to want to measure and cut your threaded rod. You're going to want to take the easy spoke pin in the base. You're going to want to get them secured together, and then take the mount piece, the piece down below, and be able and start screw. Well, actually, before you go on and do that, you start putting the top pin into the ball, and sorry about this. This is the twitchy mouse once again. So order counts as you do this, and hopefully the presentation will stop going upwards and start going back downwards. Yes. So order counts. When it comes to the seed assembly, cut your rods to 24 inches in length. You will okay, I am sorry about this. My laptop is apparently struggling here. Okay, we'll just pick up from here. From an off-the-shelf mounting perspective, once you cut your round stock, you will want to drill holes. I'm suggesting PVC caps. Don't use your thumb. This is the difference between 2A and 2B. I put it on in, and you probably can't see it, but I've got a sore on the edge of my thumb because it spun around. I didn't do it in a very safe way. So, I invoke visions of, ladders upon ladders. I use vices upon vices to be able to secure things down, but I was able to get a good solid drill through the various ones. You'll want to cut your sections of PVC pipe. I suggest 1/2 inch. Do them at 1-inch sections. This provides just a little bit of offset for each one of the spoke holes, that when it comes time to disassemble your spokes, it provides just enough for you to be able to reach around and grab hold of it and be able to pull it. This is one of the items that if you use the plug, which tends to sit a little more flat, unless you go on and sand those down, they can be a little more challenging to be able to pull out of the ball. You can see here a couple of pictures as to how I went about doing it. I used some 1/4 inch piping to create the equivalent of my spoke cap. This is for safety purposes. And then once you're done with that, you drill a hole, and you can go on and put things in. For the off the shelf, for the mounting pin, what I find works best, and fortunately this is just specifically for the 3/8 inch. I'm not sure how it might best be done for an M10, but you can take a 3/8 inch nut and you can hammer it into a piece of 1/2 inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe. And it provides a nice firm connection. And the combination of the one that goes into the piece of PVC pipe, as well as the one that goes into the PVC plug, it provides a nice straight area for you to be able to thread your rod. And you can see here through some of the pictures, 10, 11, and 12 is getting the pieces put together. And then for 14, and again here, when we start getting to 16 and 17, the execution of steps in order is appropriate here. You can see here where I first put down the spoke plug about as far as I thought it was going to need. I then put the porcupine ball on top of it, and then the combination of that and then the 1-inch section of PVC pipe, I was able to go on and get my mounting pin set. This is kind of a key first step. I suggest doing this on its own without having any other spokes put into the ball, because you'll find that you're going to want to peer through each one of the holes to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Next item is going to be adding lights to the spokes. I have got a video that shows how to go about doing this, and I suggest having a look at it. And it's a quick, easy way of being able to add the bullet lights to the spokes. And when it comes to the seat lights, so it's best to start from the tip, whether you're using a 3D printed spoke tip, and this is where that safety piece up at the very tip comes in handy. It's perfect size to be able to hold a seed light. You start with that, and then you kind of fold it over on itself down the spoke as part of doing the assembly. As you do it, you'll want to use some zip ties kind of along the way to make sure that you have a final secure fitting. Even if you don't decide to do a 3D printed ball, if you can find a way to obtain some of the seed clips, I find these really helpful because while I don't use them permanently on my spokes, they are great for helping you keep all the lights or the strings organized. I find one of the bigger challenges is, and I'm a little OCD on this, making sure that the wire of the strings is not twisted around too much as you bring it on down. So I'll put a couple of spoke clips kind of along the way. You might be able to see the little yellow clips. I use 3 or 4 along the way, and then once I have everything set, then I follow up with zip ties and secure things down. Finally, when you do this, especially for the off-the-shelf one, the cap, if you make it a little extra long, you can do it where you can slide it on out, and this way you can make sure that your wires are nice and tight. Another piece with this is you want to make sure that your bottom seeds come as close to the edge of either the PVC cap or the PVC plug as you can. Especially with these caps, you can see here an example where the bottom light is really close to the cap, and I had all sorts of extra slack between the seed lights, between the spokes to be able to make it happen. If the bottom row of seeds is a little bit further up, you can see where it gets really tight, and it's a bit more of a challenge. So you really want that bottom seed to be as close to the PVC cap bottom as you can. Prop mounting best practices. So the first thing is the disclaimer at the bottom. These are my experiential observations. This is not engineering guidance. As you build your stars, you're responsible for the proper mounting and the safety of both your display as well as your audiences. Again, the industrial strength, a mega tree class, this was simplest. It's the most expensive, but it was the simplest to be able to go on and use and make it work. We covered a little bit on telescoping tripods or speaker stands. They work well as the straight pull options. An important piece here, and we saw it with the weather one, is one of the stars went up and it just used the threaded rod as kind of its support. And with high enough winds, that threaded rod ended up bending. And you saw the picture of it, kind of bouncing around. Where you can, use some sort of reinforcement. In my case, as you can see here, I've got it reinforced. I've got my threaded rod it located inside a piece of EMT, and it's appropriately insulated on all sides to help make sure that I've got something really good. And you can see here, this is a prototype 3D print brace that doesn't work so great. I'm redesigning it some, but having something braced kind of along for wherever your tree topper is, where your ball is kind of an important thing. And while logic would say, well, just put the ball as close to the tree topper as you can, you start having challenges with your spokes because the spokes are going to start interfering with the tree topper. So you're going to have to do a little bit of engineering to figure out, what is the minimal, but the appropriate amount of height. So the next item here is we've got configured. I'm going to try to do this with about 5 minutes time, and then I think what we'll do is we'll open up for questions. So the next piece of this is the Firework Star X model. If you go out to this bit.ly link, fs-x models, you'll be taken to a Google Drive directory where I have got the version 1, the version 2, and in the future here, the version 3 configurations and X models for the various Firework stars. Once you install them and import them, it gives you a 3D polyline model. It gives you a number of model groups that you can either sequence directly to them, or you can just use them as groups to be able to have access to the number of submodels. The number of submodels for these for these Firework Star X models are really big. For example, the new one for seed lights is already at 204. And there's an interesting concept that I'm not ready to do as part of V3. But if I were to do it, 204 could end up being 600 rather quickly. So model groups are a great way to kind of organize little subsections of the submodels to make them a little bit easier as you're looking for just the right thing to sequence to. I've had a number of versions of these that are out there. If you download it and haven't upgraded from like a year ago, then you're probably on version 1. Take the time to go to version 2 or you wait to the version 3. There will be a number of changes. With version 2, I found to be able to keep as much parity between the different stars and X models as possible. I had a little subtle renaming things. And in some cases, I realized that one name was going to work a little bit better than another. As part of that version 2, I also added the compass and the matrix. The matrix is just a simple matrix. If you're looking for something quick to be able to integrate into your sequences, it's a great submodel to be able to sequence to. The compass is cool because if you have several of these stars, I use compass points, and you can define a little group with the spoke from one star to the spoke of the next one. Using compass things, it's kind of easy to figure out which one would potentially connect to the other. And then within that group, you can do things to be able to make it look like one is triggering another. It's some pretty cool capabilities, which I'll probably personally take more advantage of here in the future. And then we got the version 3. And what y'all have seen kind of in the background, if you can see my video thing right now, you can kind of see version 3 working with a seed model. I am taking a different approach with this one. I found there was so many model groups, it was difficult to be able to add a second or a third one of these stars. And so I found a way to program some of these model groups as submodels within themselves. And so I'm beginning to move things back into the model. I think it'll make it easier if you want to be able to have multiples of these within your displays. Also, for the individual submodels, I'm adding a level of depth. So instead of just having one row with all the seed numbers or light numbers for that one, they have got depth, and it really kind of opens up the number of options. I'm also finding by doing more of the stuff within submodels, it begins to reduce the number of potential options. And it's not so much unique things that you can do, but there's a lot of noise that you can spend time working with as part of the V2 model. V3 helps squelch some of that noise. There's still a lot of options, and you're going to have to do a little bit of experimentation to find exactly the right one that you want. But I think that the version 3 design is going to work a little bit better. Initially, I'm going to go out with the seed model. There's a little bit of automation work I need to do behind the scenes. Hopefully later on this fall, certainly by the beginning of next year, the original 10-point flavors of the 26, 32, and 52-point stars will be uploaded. It's all based on a polygon model. I've tried different ways. The very first one I did was a custom model, and it was a real eye crosser and mathematical challenge to be able to make that happen. Polylines are just so much easier. If you're curious, I use CAD software and increasingly some spreadsheet magic to be able to help build the model. There's still a fair amount of personal time that goes into some of these things, but I'm slowly in process of trying to find ways to automate these capabilities. When you set up your star, you're going to want to do the spiral star style. It kind of keeps it easy. You start with the top spoke, and then you go round and round until you're at the very bottom. There's also a practical aspect of this too. If you start from the top, you can kind of raise the star and continue adding the spokes until you get to the bottom. If you're trying to do this on top of a megatree and you start installing your spokes from the bottom, you're going to have to do some weird contortions by the time you hit the spokes in the middle of the ball, and then when you go up to the top. So the spiral, I find that the spiral style is just generally better. From a seed light setup perspective, I have 4 is the magic cluster number. The way I look at things within the X models is number of planes. The very top plane, in this case, it's always just going to be the top spoke, will be plane number one. The bottom will be whatever the bottom plane will be whatever the bottom spoke is. And the porcupine flavor of this happens to be plane number 5. And then you've got the various planes in between. And you can kind of see, how I suggest doing it. I've got mine right now spanning 2 different ports. Not power balanced actually at the moment. It seems to be working pretty well. But for my actual display, I'll probably power balance between them and just keep 300 lights per. And in my case, I run them at 30%. There's a number of different X model choices. As we go to the version 3 design, where everything goes into the submodels, I think we'll be able to simplify and collapse it. But if you download the version 2 today, I offer the light, which just has one model group, which is the matrix. You can define all the others if you like, but if you're going to do multiples of these stars, you only have one thing to rename before you move the next one over. And then I've got a basic and an enhanced. When you add the first firework star to your layout, do it first, experiment with a fresh, brand new layout, put it in 3D mode so you can get a sense. Do this before you go on and import it into your actual display. Use the import new model feature. Always do this, whether you're doing the first star, which obviously you have to, or you're doing a secondary star, always do an import from the new model. If you just do a simple copy, it's going to copy the model itself, but you aren't going to get any of the benefits of any of the model groups that get defined when you install it, and that becomes problematic. So always import from the new model. I tuck a lot of these model groups into a custom preview called the Firework Star Groups. I did this because my main screen is pretty crazy with all sorts of model groups as it is. And I'm going to access these in a special case. So, I just make it where I can go down to the preview and I can go to whatever particular one if I really need to go on and have a look at it. Then you set up your rocket, and then you set up the XYZ to be able to orient it. Here's a little more detail on setting up multiple firework stars in spirit of time. I'm going to zoom forward. And at this point, we've kind of made it. I'm going to suggest what we do now is we open up for a few minutes of Q&A. I will kind of end with, there's some online help, and I'll be putting in more information on how to do, load in the firework star sequence. I'm starting to play with a couple of canned sequences. There's one for a fireball, which is actually kind of a pretty cool effect. I accidentally came across it in my display last year. I could feel the digital heat emanate. It was impressive. And then I've started getting pretty big into how are real fireworks built, and what's the design? How does it look when it blasts? And there's a really cool one called a jellyfish that, with about 10-15 minutes worth of time understanding the constructs of how it exploded, I was able to apply that to the various parts in the X model, and basically able to recreate. In the pyrotech industry, it's called the jellyfish. And you can go out to YouTube and search on it. It's pretty cool looking, and you can do it with the Firework Star X model as well. So with that, I will open up for comments or questions. And okay, so I think people can unmute themselves. Anybody want to fire away with a comment or a question? Okay.
Somebody asked about the spacing between the seeds on your example.
Yes, so the spacing between the seeds is 5 centimeters. And I find that works well because you can get, 23 seeds on a spoke if you have one for the tip. And you can do that on a 2-foot length spoke. Now, when you multiply your spokes by 2, because you've got them on both sides, that means you're going to have a 4-foot firework. And if you wanted to have an 8-foot firework, you could do the standard 5 centimeter distance. I don't know if that would necessarily be worth it. It is bigger. If at some point when we go to 8-foot diameter ones, I think it'll be cool if we had like a 48 or a 72 light spoke. Not ready for that quite yet, but perhaps next year. I think there's a couple things for power and the number of data cables that need to be explored before we make that open. Any other comments or questions? So I think somebody was going to say something. Here we go. Let's see. We will try this here real quick. I'll show you what the jellyfish looks like in the X-Lite simulator. And it kind of looks like a jellyfish, as part of the real life. And we can see here one of the inspiration videos. You can kind of see this is based on a real jellyfish up there. And we will let this run for just a moment before I move to the next slide. I see, including what you see down here is kind of a representation of that kind of capability. You got the upper half, which has the globulous piece of the jellyfish, and then you've got the tentacles down below. For quick integration for other songs, what I suggest is load tracks from other props onto a particular model group. In this particular case, I think I was using the Polar Express. I loaded up the Polar Express sequence. I then went in and I selected to import the Polar Express track onto the song. And then when I did it, I took, in this case, the Megatree track, and I applied it to the model group called Hub Spinner, which is it's a whole effect. In other words, it hits all the spokes within the star, and when you have some of these layered things, what's nice is you get something really quick. You get some really cool designs. There's some that don't make a whole bunch of sense, but you get some that generally look good. But then importantly, your star begins to capture the feel and the color and the rhythm of the song and of the rest of the display. And so I find that's a quick and easy way to be able to get your star quickly integrated. You can do a more complex thing where if you have two X-Lights instances, you can take a portion of say the Megatree, for example, and apply it to the Hub Spinner, for the first 30 seconds, and then maybe for the second 30 seconds, you take the stuff from the Megatree track and you apply it to the rows or to the ribs or to the planes group, and then that way you can get a little more customized variety within your display. Final, let's just demystify this build. When I first started doing it, there were so many different names. If you post something, whether you've got a star of a different name or not, if you include Firework stars in the comments, I'm not always good. I try to remember to do some of these too, but as we do this over time, we will continue to see more of these. And interestingly enough, Firework star is also the name of a lady's fingernail polish. And so every so often they'll go on and see some of the cool fireworks stuff that we do. And with that, we've got any final questions before we get to the thank you slide?